The studio is Dorothy Parvaz, global politics reporter at ThinkProgress. And you have a really interesting piece out. The headline says, North Korea isn't begging for war. It's looking at the war of words between the U.S. and the DPRK, kind of from the perspective of Pyongyang. And you talked to a lot of analysts about this. So what is North Korea begging for?
Well, they're begging for exactly what they've said they wanted to do for decades now, which is to create a nuclear weapon system that would basically prevent the U.S. from attacking them. They have no interest in taking over South Korea at this point anyway. If they wanted to do that, South Korea is right there and they could just, they don't need a long-range missile to do that. But what they've said repeatedly over the years is that the U.S. is an existential threat to them. They see these military exercises with South Korea right in front of them as basically a direct threat. So.
One of the things that you looked at, too, was messaging from Washington and Pyongyang and the disparity there. One almost a schizophrenic approach, the other one pretty much spot on. Whether you like the message or not, the messages seem to be consistent. Talk to us about that.
Right. So, I mean, if you wanted to look at a case study for how to completely mess up a diplomatic messaging system, you would look at the Trump administration. So right now you have a White House that says one thing, which is fire and fury, locked and loaded, right? And then you have, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense that say, no, Mattis and Tillerson saying, no, we're advocating diplomacy. This is a peaceful thing. And then you have our ambassador to the UN, which, is ramping up the talk again and saying that North Korea is begging for war. So, this couldn't be more confusing if it wanted to be.
And of course, there's the messenger and then the people receiving the message, the DPRK, which I think this plays to their narrative, too, that the U.S. is a threat to them. Right.
And, and when you look at past crises, you can imagine that during for example, the Iran nuclear talks, or during the same situation with Libya or Iraq, when the U.S. was trying to talk these countries with sanctions and other pressure into giving up their nuclear programs or their ambitions. You can imagine that any message coming out of the White House was carefully crafted, and those statements were in lockstep with anything that comes out of the State Department, out of the Pentagon. But now we have an administration where the president kind of tweets off-the-cuff comments in the heat of the moment, and that just kind of runs completely counter to all the other efforts that we're hearing about, hopefully going on.
One of the other things you get into is that this is obviously creating an escalation in terms of arms in the region, which we don't really have time to get into. But one of the things that you talk about, one of the people you interviewed said, Americans have a great deal of difficulty trying to see the world from North Korea's perspective. Why is that important for Americans, and why is that important for the Trump administration?
Well, if you're trying to engage in any kind of diplomatic dealings with any country, it's important to understand what they want. How else are you going to reach a common goal if you don't know what people want? So not only does the U.S. not take into consideration what North Korea wants, which is to feel secure, ostensibly, and to not feel like it's going to be attacked by the U.S., because again, time and time again, North Korea has said that that the missiles are aimed at the U.S., not anywhere else, not Japan, not South Korea, not China, the U.S. Not only that, but the U.S. is also outsourcing its diplomacy in a very strange way, asking China, asking Russia to do its bidding in these sanction wars, when it's not really in their best interest to do that.
Dorothy, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.